where there are no clear walls and demarcations. And it would be very easy for the seller to defraud the buyer. So we were very strict and we gave this 4%, 4.1% tolerance for error. Today, we're going to talk about, now, what I'm saying now is my concept of how to explain it. But today we're talking about agricultural areas proximate to the community. There are stone walls, there are clear fences and borders around a piece of property. It's easy to walk out and check out what you're buying, pace it off, because there's a clear fence around the whole thing. Okay? So today we're going to say caveat emptor. We're going to say let the buyer beware. We're on Kuf Vav Amid Aleph, the Mishnah at the top, and we're going to see that now we're going to have literally 4 times the 4% tolerance. It's going to be 16.5% roughly, rather than 4.1. And it's going to follow similar rules to Anah. We're going to express it in those terms. B'simanov u'b'mitzarov. If the field you're purchasing has clearly demarcated landmarks and a border of a wall around it, okay? Pachos mishtus, if it's less than a sixth, meaning 16.5 roughly percent, higiu, the buyer keeps it, and caveat emptor tough nuggies. So if he's getting 84, roughly 83.5%, or he gets 116%, that's the broad tolerance in which there is no adjustment to the transaction. Okay? Now, ad shtus, if the distinction is, we're talking about 100 million down to a sixth. That's the way it's worded here. But in English, we would say more than a sixth. The seller has to refund the excess pay, the portion of the payment. And I'm guessing, I haven't seen it yet, that it would be all the way down. The way with if it was 4.5%, you went all the way down. So I'm making that
all the way down. I'm sorry.
I'm paying $100 for this place.
Yes.
Turns out to be 120%. In other words, turns out, I'm sorry, to be only 80%. Right. So instead, but 83.5% would be tolerable. Right. So I don't give you back 3.5%. I give you back 19% if it was 81. Now that's my guess. We don't know that yet, but I'm pretty sure that's where the Gemara is going to go. So just keep in mind, again, the words are very important. Up to a sixth, where, in other words, if the buyer is shorted by up to a sixth, tough noogies. If the buyer gets overage up to a sixth, tough noogies on the seller. But what about an exact sixth? The Mishnah did not, the way I read the Mishnah, a sixth is unaccounted for, but b'diyuk, an exact, meticulous sixth. Okay? So, let's do the Gemara. Itmar, we learned, Rav Huna Omer, Rav Huna tells us, shtus, an exact sixth, kapachos mishtus, is treated as less than a sixth. and the sale is perfectly valid, no adjustment. Rav Yehuda Aimer Shtus Ki Yoser Mishtus. An exact sixth is treated as if it's more than a sixth, and the price is adjusted. The seller has to return money to the buyer. Rav Huna Omer Shtus Kapachas Mishtus. He claims that the sixth is treated, the exact sixth is treated exactly the same as up to a sixth. Hachi Kamar, and that's when what the Mishnah means when it says Pachos Mishtus Vishtus Beklau. Less than a shtus and a sixth is included. It's less than a sixth or an exact sixth. Are treated the same. The transaction stands, no bezdin, no adjustments. Yoser mishtus, but if it's a tiny abashahu more than a shtus, you go to bezdin, and the bezdin makes the guy give you a refund, okay, of the percentage of the price, because he gave you less land than you thought you were buying, and you get your money. You get a chunk of your money back. Rav Yehuda Omer Shtus v'kiyoser b'shtus. Now, on the other hand, Rav Yehuda told us that a sixth, an exact sixth, is treated as more than a sixth or more. Okay, Hachi Kamar, that's what the Mishnah said when it says Pachos Mishtus. It meant literally less than a sixth. Higiyo, then the transaction stands. Ad Shtus Vishtus V'chlal, up to a sixth, meaning more than a sixth, inclusive of a perfect sixth. Yakana, the price is adjusted, and the bezdin tells him how much to give back. So Meisvei, we're going to challenge this position. Now, it doesn't specifically say it, but from the wording, we'll see it's challenging Reb Huna. Okay? B'simanov u'b'mitzarov. We're talking about land that's fenced in or has very clear demarcations. Pichashtus osershtus. And he gave the field over to the buyer who gave him money, and it turns out to be short or too little land or too much land, up to 16.5% be'erech. Harehu kashum hadayanin. So this would be a similar case. He's trying to draw an analogy to an assessment by the court. What we're talking about is if children survive a dead father and inherit land, they can't farm it. So the bezdin steps in, gets an appraisal of the land, and sells the land. If the transaction, in other words, if the appraisal is high a little bit or low a little bit, the transaction is good, and there it's up to a sixth, and the sixth is included, and the sixth is not included. So, and the bezdin would have to take back the land, give the guy his money back if he paid too little, more than up to exactly a sixth. Okay, so that and yet that Brisa there says that this Brisa tells us that a demarcated field is similar to this bezdin ordered transaction, and there it's exactly a sixth. So you see that it goes back. So you see that's an argument to Rav Huna. Amar Lach Rav Huna would rebut this argument. Ula Taimech, according to your concept, that 1/6 is equal to more than a sixth. How do you understand a brisa? Higia Katani. The Brisa says that the guy keeps the field and the kids get the money, even if they were shorted. Ella, so here you have to explain the Brisa like this. Kishum hadayanim lo kishum hadayanim. On the one hand, it's exactly what the dayanim said, but the error is corrected. On the other hand, it's exactly what the dayanim said, and the error is not corrected. Okay? Kishum hadayanim lishtos. It's exactly like what if the error is up to exactly up to a sixth, the transaction is adjusted. I'm sorry, if it's up to the transaction stands. Velokashum dayanim, if we do not hold, in other words, the judgment of the dayanim is ignored. If the adjustment is more than a sixth, the ilu hasam batel makach, that then the transaction is completely canceled and the kids get their land back and the money goes back to the buyer. The ilu hacha, but over here, where the buyer had the opportunity, saw the fence around the field, he knows what he's dealing with, an exact six, the deal stands. So that's Rav Huna's refutation of the Brisa that was used to challenge him. Okay? Now, we do not yet have a view, an opinion, but we're going to now, as we often do, style of the Gemara, we're going to look at a real case, a Maisa Shahoya, and see what they paskined. Okay? And now we're going to introduce, how come a sixth? We've always been talking about 4.1%, and now we're talking about 16.5%. The error can be 4 times as great, and we ignore it. Okay, that's like a Pella. I mean, astonishing. So here we go. Rav Papa, Zavin Ara Meha Hugavra, Rav Papa, the famous Rav Papa, purchased a piece of demarcated land from an individual. Amarle, the seller, touted the land to Rav Papa. Have Esrim Girize Mashche. This land is 20 units, probably say as in size. Okay? V'lohavi ella chamesra. And when Rav Papa took title and then he went out and measured it, it was only 15. Now that's off by a fourth. That's considerably more than a sixth. Okay? But the buyer didn't give him his money back. He went back to the buyer, and the buyer said, Caveat emptor, tough noogies. So Rav Papa took him to Din Torah. Also, Lakaime de Abaya. They went to Abaya to a bezdin. Omarle, Savrat, V'kabelat. You looked at it, and you accepted it. So therefore, you're not getting your money back. And caveat emptor, tough noogies. So Rav Papa pulled out his little pocket mishnayos and showed it to Abaya. V'hatanan, but how about our Mishnah? Pachas mishtos higiyu, up to a sixth error. The transaction stands. Adshtus yikane. If there's greater than a shtus, you have to get a portion of your money back. And here it's only a fourth. So Abaya says, Hani mili heichadalo kimle begavo. The rule of a sixth applies when the buyer is not familiar with the fields and the gardens and so on in this neighborhood. Aval heche de kimle begave. But over here, you live in the same community, both of you. You know the area. You had a chance to walk out and see what you're buying. Kabel, Savar Kabel. You saw the land, you knew the piece of land, and you accepted it. Caveat emptor. So Rav Papa says, yeah, but let's examine exactly what happened. I understand. I'm a jerk. I should have measured it. But listen to what happened. This guy said to me, Hacha Esrin Amali. The guy told me it was 20. He lied. So Abaya says to him, the Adifa Be'esrin. What he may have meant, this is a Dan Lachav Sechus. What he might have meant is even though this particular God is only 15, it has incredibly good topsoil. It's been beautifully irrigated, and you will get a yield from this 15 garden as if it were a 20. In other words, he was advertising the fertility of the garden. He wasn't telling you its size. Okay? And that's the end of the story. So, Erwin, you're right with the caveat emptor. Unless it's impossible, in other words, where it's feasible for the buyer to do his own investigation, and he doesn't, tough noogies. But if it's way out there and it would be impossible unless he hires a surveyor and they get the rope and stuff, then we do not give the buyer so much tolerance, the seller so much tolerance, because it's much easier to take advantage of people. Okay? Now, we could, I asked my son, Shaila, is this answer to Rav Papa just specific to this case? And he said, no, it's probably the general rule. All right. Now, we're going to get a piece of Gemara that at this point is a non sequitur. It makes no sense in the flow. We'll see later on they try to hook it up. So I'll give the background here. Siblings inherit a piece of land. Okay? We're going to say the oldest son died, and we want to make it a simple case. So 3 brothers in the first part of the Gemara inherit a piece of land.
No bechor.
What?
No bechor.
There's no bechor. We don't want to complicate the math. It's 3 acres. They do the best they can at breaking it up into 3 1-acre pieces. Now one brother says, look, it's easier to work a 3-acre plot. Let's treat it as a corporation. All 3 of us each own a third, and we'll farm it and we'll split up the profits. One brother agrees with him. Another brother says, no. You know, I never liked you guys. You always ganged up on me when we're little kids. I want my piece, and I want to fence it in. That's the case, okay? Tanya, we have a brisa, Rabbi Yossi Aimer, ha'achen shecholku. If the brothers decide to split it up into individual portions, one brother, and they draw lots to see which piece that brother is going to get. Okay? As soon as they use a lottery method to determine which piece the insistent brother gets, okay? Kanu kula. They all have title, which means the one brother gets his demarcated piece, and the other brothers own the remainder in joint tenancy. Okay, everybody understand that? Okay. My timer, why is that the case? In other words, why don't they continue the Gorel and divide the rest of it? So the Gemara explains, Omer Rav Elazar, Kitchilas Eretz Yisrael, when Yehoshua divvied up the land of Israel, Ma Tchilas Begoyrel, whoever, some they didn't, everybody, 600,000 people did not get all the land in one lottery. They kept divvying it up and making Goralim. And you got this piece, and by the end, 3 weeks later, another guy got that piece, right? So, Matzilas begoyrel, Afkan begoyrel, will use that initial allocation process and apply it to the ongoing divvyings up as Jews, people die and their kids inherit. So, Malahalan. So the Gemara argues, just a minute. Back then, they had a special box with the lots, with the straws in it. And they had the Urim V'Tumim confirming the selection process. Okay? So back then, and if you want to make it an analogy, Afkan B'Kalpe V'Urim Tumim. So now, too, we should have the box and the Umim B'Tumim. And of course, we have neither. Okay? So how can this happen? So Omer Ravashi says, Behahu hano'ah dekol tzaisei lahadadi, gamrei umaknu lahadadi. Since the dispute between the brothers is resolved, and they benefit from this Gorel process, okay? They all agree to it, so we will allow the first brother to take title to his piece and let the other two decide later whether they're going to work in joint tenancy or divide the rest up. But in other words, since everybody is thrilled at this point, we don't need the analogy. We're just doing a simple Bezdin thing, which is almost always the case. If Shnayim Ochsen Betalis, the Bezdin splits the difference. So this is a normal procedure, and it's acceptable because everybody is at least not unhappy.
Sell the whole plot of land.
They can do what they want, but everybody has to agree. In other words, the other two could sell out to their brother, they could sell to a neighbor, could work it themselves, etc. Okay, now, a new brisa. Now we're going to introduce all right. There is a halacha. If Marty, Bob, and I have a dispute, and we go to Bezdin, all three of us have to be there, okay? But now we're going to see that maybe that's not so, okay? Itmar, we have a case. Shnei Achin Shacholku, two brothers believe themselves. A letter comes from Spain. Your father, who went to do business in Spain 25 years ago, he died. So the two brothers take the family plot in, near Yericho and split it up between themselves, okay? Obolehen ach Medina Sayam. And then a year later, a fellow comes from Spain with his DNA test in hand and say, I'm your long-lost brother that your father had in Spain. I want a third of the land. So what's the deal? If you say that since everybody wasn't present, they all lose title, then they have a new process to divvy it up. That's one way of viewing it, okay? But Rav said, okay, that's Rav. Rav Omer Batla Machlaikes. Machlaikes here means the divvying. We ignore that original distribution process and put it back all into the estate, reopen the estate, and divvy the land among the three siblings. Again, ignoring a bachor, doing it equally for simplicity. It would work the other way too. Okay, Shmuel Aimer, Mekamtsin, literally means you squeeze it, but what it means is this one gives a sixth of his half on the right, and this one gives a sixth of his half on the left. And now the new dude gets the chunk in the middle, so each winds up with a third, if my math is right. If not, change the sixth to whatever it should be. Okay, that's Bob's department. So basically, Rav says you just adjust. You must reopen the case because he wasn't here when we did it. And Shmuel says, no, you work with what we've got and adjust it to give him his fair share. Okay? Now, what's Rav's point? Omerle Rava Rav Nachman. Rava asks Rav Nachman Rav the Omer Batla Machlaikis. According to Rav, who says we cancel the original distribution and reopen the issue, Alma Hadar Dina, that is based on the idea that if all the litigants aren't present, whatever the Bezdin decided has to be canceled and you have to reopen the case. Elamiyata, but according to that, how about a case that everybody's familiar with? Three guys are partners in a store. Elamiyata, Hani Beit Halsa, De Kaime. Three businessmen are partners in a business and they're all residents in town. And they agree to divvy up the business. We're closing it and divvying up the money and the inventory, etc., etc. Azul Beitrei Minayu V'Palug, and two of them, with or without a bezdin, begin the divvying up process. Hachinami the butler machlaikes. Would Rav insist that everybody return the cash they got? They each got $5,000. They each got exactly equal, but two took charge. One wasn't there. Would Rav make them reopen the deal? Okay, no. So why does Rav say in the case of the inheritance? In other words, the analogous case, we would not require all three to be present. So Reb Nachman answers, Hachi Hashta. Can you really say that's a genuine analogy? Hasam denichzi adaite debate lasa mikara. All three of them were present when they agreed to divvy it up. So everybody was perfectly happy that it be divvied up. And when they did it fairly, it doesn't matter that Reuven happened to not be there that day. But in the case of the land, okay, lo nechisi adaite debate lasa mikara, there was absolutely no knowledge of the third brother. So when they divvied it up, they ignored the possibility of a three-way split. And it could be that in some ways there's a disadvantage. Maybe one of the field, maybe there's a river running between the two. So you get water and I get water. But now when this third guy comes in, that impedes the water collect. In other words, you have to take more things into account when you split land three ways than you do when it's two ways. So it might be unfair to ignore that brother. So now, that was a challenge to Rav's perspective. Now we're going to challenge Shmuel's perspective. Amalei Rav Papa Labaye, L'Shmuel da Omer Machamtzin. mekamtin, I'm sorry, we slice off from each sibling to make up the land for the long lost brother. Lamemra de kumdina. Does that mean that Shmuel would say that in a Bezdin, where Bob and I go to court and ignore Marty's interest, that the Bezdin would allow the case to stand? Ha, Rav and Shmuel, the Amrei Travayu, both Rav and Shmuel agree. Kur b'shloishim anamaychelach. I'm selling you a kur for 30 sloyim. We had this case the day before yesterday, I think. Yachol achsir bo afilu b'seya achroina. Depending on how you worded it, if I'm selling you 30 kur for a seller each, then we can cancel the transaction up till the even up to and after the 29th seya is measured out. A seller is measured out, okay? Kur b'shloishim seya b'seller ani meichelach, but I'm selling you a kur for 30 sloyim, not a seller per coin per seller, but 30 coins for the whole deal. Rishon kana. As soon as the first seller goes into your possession, the transaction is finalized, and that's the end of the deal. So we see in this case that Shmuel. So the bottom line is, we'll just do the top line on the next page. Hasam Avad Rabbanan Milsa Denichale Lamoicher Venichale Delakeya. That when it is possible and it is advantageous for both parties, the Bezdin makes a ruling of that sort. So in the time in this purchase, where it takes a long time to bring your wagon and pick up a whole kur of grain, if the price goes down, the buyer would love to cancel and renegotiate at the lower price. On the other, and therefore we let him do that. If you word it in such a way that it's buying kur by kur, seller by seller. On the other hand, if the price rises over the week, this guy's coming and taking his grain in his wagon, the seller would love to renegotiate at least the rest of the deal. So the Bezdin will say that if you word the transaction correctly, either one of you has the opportunity to renegotiate if it is so determined. But if it's worded that this is one mass covered by one sale, then the minute you start picking up, it's your deal. It's like going to the liquor store and buying 12 bottles of wine, but you can't carry them all. So you take 5 in a shopping bag out to the car and come back in. He can't say, well, I changed the price. You can't have the rest. You paid them. You paid for them. You made a kinyan on part, but it was one case that you were buying. Okay, Ad Khan, and have a great day and keep safe, and we'll see what happens tomorrow.
Welcome to on the radio this morning. We're not even considered in the hurricane zone.
Right.
It's, I don't know, according to the 5 o'clock, it's a little bit south, and all of Palm Beach County is in a tropical storm warning, which means we could have 70 mile an hour wind. If there's 50, 60, 70 mile an hour wind, I ain't coming.
But if the storm weekend,
How about if there's 65?
no, it's just
My wife will make the decision. If she's interested in being a rich widow, she'll tell me come.
That's not a breeze.
What? Even 40 is high.
Yeah, over 100 miles, or 130 miles per hour winds.
What?
When it makes landfall.
We don't know that yet. It's been fooling them. They wanted it to be a 4. By now, it's still well up in the 5. So it could land as a 4.
Which means it goes.
And it's a few miles south of where it was, the cone is shifted a wee bit. Which means it more could affect us. I'm talking about the Daytona Beach still being a hurricane.
You speak them out. That's good. Yeah.
It's already like a record-breaking storm. Nothing ever started in the Gulf before to become a 5.
And it's back to back with that element.
Never kept at Tampa. Whoa. And this will be the first direct hit on Tampa in over 100 years.
Really?
Yeah. They've really been fortunate. And there's still like boards and stuff from the previous one in piles on the streets. So you get 110-mile wind. Those things are going to be missiles. All right, Robert, you got your phone still. Mel wasn't in the car. When I get home, I'll call him and see what's doing. But he's always in the car by 6:30. Now it would be by 10 after. When I went out, he was in the car, and Mel and Ruben wasn't waiting. No passenger.
No tips.
Well, the Uber, they didn't send in a cancellation, so the Uber fee still holds. I put in the credit card.
All right.
And I gave myself a 5.
Good.
Remember, several years ago, I happened to be in California for a wedding. I was in LA. So some people kind of started talking about the weather conditions. And I said, well, man, yeah, we can ground us more.
Yeah. No, still, my concern was always that was always the pain. Go into Brooklyn. You don't go into Brooklyn.
Oh, that. And then,
And I still remember one, I think it was Sunday or something. I went into Brooklyn, and then I had to go in a second time to get some more bread. It was crazy. We were talking about a big snowstorm didn't materialize.
the one thing, this is a dangerous season. I was taken to the house, I was walking to school. From the hospital. That was a nice sheet of black ice, and my feet went up, boom.
That happened to Cheryl Johnson. She was coming back from the store. She parked, she got out of the car, with black ice, so she didn't really see it. And her leg split and everything. She went down. She's still suffering from it. Every once in a while. She was just lying there. She couldn't do it. Couldn't do anything. She would call for help.
That's the hamstring is,
Yeah. But poo since I've come down, it's been pretty good. Down here anyway. Go for rats on. So the rat.
well, you look at a map, that's what it looks
Right,
like.
right. That's why they call it that. They call it Boca Raton, the map of it. You know,
The mouth.
Columbus or whoever came,
That's
said, hey,
the mouth. At the Boca Raton, they was talking about a rat. And, what the hell his name is, they said that he's fluent in Spanish, and he says, Rotundo's mean a rat, he's a mouse. The kind of rat. So, that's the way you're saying it. But some of these drugs, you say a mouse, instead of you say a rat.